I see they mean it. It wouldn't be my life if I didn't have to adjust my positioning. Good morning, everybody. We'll just wait for people to gather, and I think I've got a good camera field there now. No, that didn't work either. Hmm. Hmm. I'm going to keep trying since we have a few seconds here. Hmm. I wonder if I can trick it. Doesn't appear that I can, which is perfectly fine. This is new for us, doing this on YouTube, so as you can see, there is some adjustment, as always. And I live for that. Oh, hi, Sue. Hello. Well, you know what? I'm excited too. I'm very excited too. And there we go. I think we actually have a screen. So we'll hang on for a few minutes. You all will be thrilled to know too. I live across from a European style market, and they're not playing right now, but they will be soon. There's a tuba band over there pumping out patriotic songs, and so that should be our background music here for our deconstructions. I know you're going to dig it. We'll get started in about 3 minutes. Hi, Franklin. Many of the CGB team will be online with us during this live broadcast, so if you do have questions, they will get answered one way or another. Just post them. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. Sorry about the sideways sausage screen. It didn't seem to recognize any other angle for my camera, but we'll get it right. This is my first time here doing this live on YouTube. Is the sound quality good? Can someone please comment on that? Ooh, and a helicopter. Wonderful. Washington, D.C., helicopters, brass bands, you don't even know what. Hello, Suzanne. Hello, Francesca. Evelyn, welcome, welcome. Okay, so brass band, steel yourself, taking apart the podcast, steel yourself. None of these things will turn out to be any big deal. And then if I do have some hilarious problem deconstructing, well, guess what? You get to see me solve it. So we have a lot of people joining. I'll start an explanation and start snipping in just a minute or two. Naturally, we're back. Looking at the ceiling. Hey, look at that. I think I actually got you back. Well, life is exciting, and that's all that I can say. We'll let people catch back up with us. Well, hello, everyone. I'm sorry we got interrupted, and, the thrill of it all, right? I don't hear the brass band. We seem to be going. So, hello. This is Kate McKinnon, and I'm the team leader of Contemporary Geometric Beadwork, and I'll be doing a deconstruction for you here. And because we haven't done this before, there'll be things to learn. That's for sure. The video quality on my phone screen looks fantastic, but I'm just checking on my computer to see if it's as good as it should be. And it looks a little fuzzy to me on my screen. Can anyone confirm video quality? I don't want to do this and then have it be unretrievable like we found with Facebook. Okay, good. Yeah, mine's resolved now too. So I think we seem to be fine, and I'm going to go ahead. When I post this video online, my hope is that I'll be able to edit this down to just the wonderful parts. Sue says a little fuzzy there. I also tried clicking on my settings and just confirmed that I wanted to watch it at a higher resolution. And although that was already what I had selected, it seemed to work when I refreshed my screen. So we probably just had some hink because the live stream got cut off. So anyone who, and Susanna, I know it wouldn't seem to let me in any orientation shoot in landscape. So things to learn, things to know. But for now, we're just going to charge ahead. Anyone whose screen seems fuzzy, please click your settings on YouTube. Choose the highest resolution your bandwidth will allow. I'm at 720, and then refresh your screen. Let me just then, while people get caught up on resolution, say what I'm about to do. These are beautiful constructs that we've made from tiny little podcast beads. There's a whole video series if you'd like to catch up on what we've done, building these sets out to a certain number of rounds with a certain quality of sections, and we've done many different exploding podcast sets. And this guy right here is a slightly different one that I'd like to show you. This is what we all did together. The podcast bead will soon reveal itself to be just the little ring in here that starts with the yellow or the blue beads. And I'm going to snip the new work or use my deconstruction points that I've left here, my little detonation points, if needed to remove the rounds. But normally I just go in with scissors and snip. And so remember these two little beads that I just sort of left out in the air as deconstruction beads? This is one of the tactics you can do. I could zoom in a little closer, yes, but I think the fuzziness is not necessarily here at this end. And remember, I'm going to have to pick it up and handle it, so I don't want to get too out of focus. I think that what you need to do is check your settings if it seems fuzzy and choose a higher resolution and possibly refresh your screen. So this is kind of as close as I can zoom and still have room to work. So I'm going to cut this little thread here with these sort of random beads that I had put on earlier. And the idea with that is my very first thread, we tend to throw in a few deconstruction points, and it's possible that when I wiggle that, the first thread will pop out. What I normally do is go in and snip between the increased beads of the first round. And I'll be doing this many times, so you'll have a chance to see what I'm doing. The podcast beads ends at the yellow beads here, and so I'm going to push my scissors in through only the first two beads that were added, the pink beads, and I'm gradually going to separate the podcast bead from my wave section like this. But see, it's fine. I'm going to do it carefully, deliberately. The yellow beads were my podcast. The first round of my new set was pink. And so I've got my scissors just between the pink beads. And I've done this a bunch of times. So I'm kind of feeling on the back for when my scissors tips come through. And then not until I know for sure that I'm only through the pink beads and I kind of feel them touching through on the other side, do I go ahead and snip. So if you do a few in a row, it almost starts to come apart for you, but at first it may seem just a little sticky. So just make sure I got that thread completely snipped. Go on to another one, and soon it'll start coming apart in my hand. And as long as you're careful, right? For those of you who either don't want to or have any trouble with snipping these threads, remember you've likely left in a few deconstruction beads as well. But oh my, you can kind of see where we're going here. This first thread, not useful anymore. It's just coming out. It was only what we used to tack our new idea onto the podcast bead. And so you can sort of tug and snip as you've seen me do, but I think that's dangerous for beginners because you could end up snipping the wrong thread. One of the nice things you can do to help yourself is remove loose threads as you deconstruct them so that your workspace is simpler. So this is a nice time to stop and take a look at the situation because I think you can see that even though it seems unlikely once this thing is off, if you look in here, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 beads per side. And that is exactly what is available on the podcast bead, which had an increase, a bead, and an increase. And so that's what you're seeing here. Although the increases, as you notice, because this is a deconstruction, this that looked like a 2 bead increase actually separates to become what we would call the fill round or just that bead in every slot. So there are lots of things you can do with this increase pattern while you're building deconstructing sets. And I don't want to confuse the issue by mentioning too many of them, but you can see how these beads spread out right here. So from that, you kind of intuit, oh, I could put on 2 increases in a row, and the first one I cut would open up to be the fill round. And then you'd have a different pattern. It'd be like 1, 2, 1, all the way you went. But first of all, I thought it was most important that we understand the hexagon increase. And so that's what this first thing we're removing is the wave section, which is just in pink and red, and it's 6 rounds of hexagon increase. And ours went on in a 2, 1, 1 pattern. Increase, point, or splitter. We like to call them splitter beads now because that makes more sense. We learned that from Julia Prettel. Increase, splitter, and fill. And I'd love to hear from you guys. I have perfect video quality here on my end. My screen looks great. And if I could get a little feedback on whether or not you're seeing this well, that would be everything to me before I do some more deconstruction. Can anyone have a comment? Okay, and Deb, I will be zooming in, but remember, I need room for my hands to work, and so I'll be showing each snip as well as I can as I do it. So bear in mind that I am snipping. Oh, good, here comes a brass band. That'll be great. What I do with these is I just sort of tug a little until things don't want to come off anymore. And then I'll go in and clean up the threads, which you see you can sort of worm this first thread out too, right? You can worm it out, but I prefer snipping. And so I'll show you again as close up as I can here. You see the last 2 yellow beads of the podcast, right? I could go on the other side too. Remember, this is a many-sided form, right? And I could look for the blue beads on the podcast, and if it made more sense to me, I could put my scissors in on this row. So let me try one from this side. You have to be careful only to cut this one thread. So my scissors are going just between these pink beads, and I'm going to cut only that one thread. And the way I do it is I get my scissors on and I kind of push them through the fabric a little bit until I can feel it. And you have to be careful. You have to develop sort of a feel for this. But you can see I also have little detonation points just in case. And I think I've already lost the ones that I put on this round. But at any rate, let me just keep snipping. And you'll see this as it goes along in more and more detail as the sets open up. So not the yellow beads, but I'm snipping the thread that goes between the first 2 increase beads. And what I generally like to do is snip all the way around and then wiggle. Snip and wiggle, snip and wiggle. And oh my goodness, can we have one last moment of silence for the podcast feed on this gorgeous bangle? Oh my, oh my. So be careful, never pull and tug. You can always snip or you can wiggle out the thread, whatever you like. Oh my, oh my. And so sometimes the last one is the one that wants to cling like grim death. Especially if you've used Fireline, as we've learned. Wonderful thread, but very clingy doing deconstructions. I recommend using thread for this first round. Okay, so, well, that was very nice, right? Let me remove the threads and you can marvel over the size, right, of this thing. Alrighty, that's very nice. Now, let's have a look. Isn't that cool? Now, oh, Nancy, an X-Acto. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. An X-Acto. Oh, some people use thread burners. Whatever you're brave enough to do, but I cannot advise an X-Acto blade. Nico Williams uses one, and it's badass to do that. But, you know, you could really, really go wrong. Same as a thread burner, though. But I want to show you. You can really see through these increase points. And you see the threads. Let me try to focus on an increase here. The threads that you see through here, I can cut any one of those threads, and as long as I haven't reinforced, those are just the threads that put the round on. And this is one of the things that we discovered. Oh, that first thread is just completely disposable. So here's our starter, mama. And then we can try on the bangle. Let me pull back as much as I can. So this is my size, and I kind of knew that going in. I designed this so that everyone would have a wonderful time. So you could actually wear this bangle just like this, and obviously I could do things to it to make it more bangly. But this is definitely my size, and everything that I make from this set will be my size. And now, so that's our first deconstruction, right? But we're not done yet. And if you love this bangle, fantastic, but you could always make another one. So ready for the next one? Woo! Somebody says cuticle scissors work well. That's true. My favorites are these scissors here from Karen K. Buckley. She's a quilter, and she designed them to have serrations. Let me show again the focus here. Well, they have serrations on the blades, and so it's very easy for them to grab the fabric, and it also works very well for this. Now, let's get back to the business here. This right here, this is my step-up thread, or it's just a random thread, or it's both. It looks like it was just a random thread. This first round here is going to be a little loose because remember, this was built in a tighter fold than this. And so now if you see a bead or two that looks loose, it's because the thread is stretching out and finding its new way. It was born folded up, and now this is like a butterfly stretching its wings. So you will definitely see the threads start to equalize. Now, why don't we take off the rickrack section and then have a look at what we've got here. What I really feel is important to mention is that the two casting spines need to come off as one. You need to be able to take all 6 rounds of this off together, right? Because you need to do stitch in the ditch on them, and I'll explain that after they come off. So the next deconstruction is the rickrack, and I know that the rickrack starts with blue beads, and so it doesn't matter if I cut the thread between an increase or a decrease. It's just the first thread that put the round on, and it's the only one I can see. And so I can cut either one. It just depends on what I can get to. And so I want to cut the first blue beads that went on next to the pink beads. And this is where it can come in really handy, as I've mentioned before, having a detonation point, because you can see that this little guy right here was covering that base. And when I cut that off, I should be able to wiggle this apart. It doesn't always come off as easily as other things do, but eventually that first little thread will reveal itself and go, oh, I just got cut, and off it will come. And so the wave section is one that I usually find some spot that's pliable, right? And then I just continue gently to thread for this section, so it'll be really obvious. And you're going to find out quickly if you accidentally reinforced into another section after you put this first round on. You'll find out very quickly. The deconstructions here of the spine should be a breeze because of this beautiful new thing I figured out for myself of using a continuous thread to put on the first round of the spine. So there are lots of ways to solve this, including dissolving suture. We have quilting thread that dissolves in water. And if you use dyed beads, that won't be happy for you. But otherwise, it should be fine. Oh, look at that. Wow, that is so beautiful. That's really something. I'm still looking to see if I have any more deconstruction points or if I only left one. Normally I leave more than one, and I like to go ahead and cut them, but it looks like I only left one there, which is fine, which is fine. It just is a little slower taking things off like this. That's all. And so you can see that I'd have it off already. If I had left in deconstruction points all the way around, I'd already have this off because I would just snip them and off they would go. I probably had in my mind how wonderful it would be to show a slow deconstruction. And I just want to be clear that it's all going to be fine. You know, you can reinforce these before they come off too if you're clever, but it involves stepping back in and never crossing the boundaries. Once you have 3 rounds on of any section, you can gently reinforce it back to the start, but there's always a danger that you'll forget yourself and reinforce down into another round, right? So again, just removing the first thread, and in this case, I'm slowing you the very slow snip deconstruction where you take it as far as it wants to go, and then you just keep snipping. This one I think I can hold up a little closer here. And for anybody who wonders if it's faster to do it this way than start with loose beads, yes, yes. Even if you make a little mistake and you have to sew a few beads on, it's usually not more than a tiny handful of beads. And this is so much easier than starting with a loose bead start for all of these different pieces. I find that starts like this take at least an hour just for the start. Let me clean the threads off here. Be right back. The red thread is dyed too, so sometimes it turns our fingers just a little bit red. Okay. So as I say, don't worry if you see me turning red, everything's fine. All right, let me remove this for a second. Here's our beautiful wave section. And remove the excess threads. Look how interesting this is. So this is, again, it was born folded, and so you can see how comfortable it is thinking about being a folded form. And it's still pliable enough to fold it up into that same little tiny thing it was when it was on the podcast. So 1, 2, and I'm just removing the threads here from the other section, and we'll separate the rickrack from the spines. So again, you can see how much easier, or perhaps quicker, that would have been if I had put in more detonation points. And so I encourage you to do that. You never know when you're going to need them. Okay, so here we go. This wave section too, I normally will try these on when I take them off. Now this is perfect. It looks a little bit big for me, but once I show you how we handle this, you'll see that it's exactly the right size for what I want to do. So we have podcast and wave, and now we'll separate the spine section. And here's where we had a little bit of fun putting on the spine. And for the first round, I just jumped across from one point to the other. Let me get the focus in here a little better, if possible. Can you guys all hear the brass band now? Seems there's a limit. Well, you know, these live streaming things do have their limits, and so this is why we don't do all of our videos live. But I'll get as close as I can so that you can see, getting these little loops out of the way, I'm cutting the thread that went between the spines when we put them on. Okay? And then this whole section will peel off of the parent piece. And we do have some nice deconstruction beads set in somewhere on this one, which I'll snip off now. And making sure that's not holding the 2 spines together. No. See how they fly. But they don't always peel off immediately. Sometimes it takes them a minute to realize, oh, my thread got cut, and then off they come. So the spine starts at the orange beads. Right, so see how that goes? It just suddenly realized, and oh, you can see the spines coming off are straight peyote. So this is pretty neat. I'm about a foot away from my beadwork, as you can imagine, so if you see me like lining up like I'm coming into land, that's why. And be careful which threads you cut when you're doing it this way, the pull apart way. Oh, look, I had another deconstruction point I could have cut. Wouldn't that have been nice? So if you see extra thread in here, well, that's true. There is extra thread, and the beads may seem a little loose and stretchy, but that's because, remember, this was built as a folded form. So there is going to be a little looseness in this edge round, which is why you want to support it, not tear it away. You don't have to worry as long as you don't cut the wrong thread. You guys see this? How it looks like you're going to have a problem, but really it's just that there's so much looseness in the thread being built on an angle that once you gentle it off and take the threads out, those peyote beads will align, and what you're going to get is something that's as soft as silk. Hmm? I just, I could not have planned to have a tuba band here. That's just like, nobody could plan that. So this will leave me lots of little loose snips. For those of you who are fastidious, you might not like that. Look how long this is, right? Only cut the thread you're sure of. So Susanna Thompson and others have a tactic that they like to do to make sure they know what thread they're cutting, and I support this. This is using a different color for the first round, and I do that sometimes. That way you're like, oh, I only cut the green thread, and you can be sure in these situations when you're cutting. Deconstruction points, though, are your very best bet. Okay, so a little messier, right? But off comes an insanely long set of tools and a beautiful rickrack bangle. Now, this, I wanted to make a tall cylinder, and this is really funny. So this looks too big for me, right? But it isn't. And this only small, it only seems small because I've only done 6 rounds. Those of you who've done 12 rounds are going to have a different experience. So let me once again take these pieces away and groom them a bit. Wasn't that wonderful? So it's a little easier if it's right in front of your face and you have more detonation points and etc. But this was fine. This was just fine. Okay, so here's the rickrack. And then I'll take the spines away and get rid of their threads. Are you guys deconstructing your pieces in real time too? I hope so. It's exciting to think of some pieces coming apart while we're all together here. So little bitty rickrack, only 6 rounds of wave and 6 rounds of rickrack. So far, these are the minimums we can do to come off with success. The very minimums. All right, and the spine is dethreaded, and the spine is so soft and supple you would not even believe it. I mean, there is simply no way that I can do this from a peyote start. I'm not capable of it, and few are. Catherine Costa, Leanne Bayman, Kat Oliva. Look at this. Oh! So this wasn't meant to be the super close-up microscopic video that I can make when I'm using, real video technology. But this is to show you how to do the larger motions. If any of you would like to see close up how deconstruction works, we've already done that. And on this very YouTube channel, you can look at the previous Exploding podcast set, and you'll have an opportunity to see close up how each round is deconstructed. So this is a compromise. This is something that we can all do together, but if you'd like to see close up, don't worry, you can. So really what I want to communicate here is, oh my goodness, the supple softness of the things that come off. And this was born folded too. So remember, you may not be used to folding your beadwork into little tiny lines like this, but this thing was born folded. It was born easy. So this is 21 points and 6 beads per point. And this is the same size. Let's just go to rickrack for a minute here and we'll talk about each section. This is the same size, right? Except it is built up twice as much. And so believe it or not, these bangles are the same. So if you want just a thin little strip, well, 6 rounds might be too big. And then you saw how this fit me. I'll put them on together. They don't even look like the same thing. They're just spread out so much. And then this one, I kind of have to worm over my hand, which is actually a really good bangle fit for me because I have smaller wrists, and even at that, I have a lot of play. But right here at 6 rounds, it's wiggly, and I have even more play in my sizing. I know it doesn't seem credible. Let me remove these off camera. It doesn't seem credible, but in fact, it's true. So the difference between 12 rounds of rickrack and 6 rounds of rickrack in sizing is deeply profound, right? And so if you'd like to make a tall rickrack cylinder, even this might not be big enough for me. It's possible that I'd have to go up 2 sizes if I wanted to build it twice as tall as that. So if I take this off, if I've only done 6 rounds and I take this off and it's too big, my only next task is to build it smaller, and then I need to keep trying it on, right? A couple of you went crazy with your rickrack and made it say 14 rounds or 20 rounds or something like that. Well, you know what? If I had done that with this, look at oh my goodness, it wouldn't fit me anymore. So if your rickrack is too tight, here's a fun thing for you. Just cut some rows off of it. This is where deconstruction can come in handy in everyday life. So I could just take this and cut it, right? Oh my goodness. And it would immediately separate into two rickrack bangles. And then if you want to get fancy, where did I cut this? I'll do it the same place at each round here. If I wanted to get fancy, I could take it and I could cut just a little bird beak off of each tip and then go around and reinforce. And so immediately you have what looks to be a very complicated rickrack. And there's no maximum amount of rounds. It's just that at some point it won't fit you. And at some point it will. And so this is a way to get extra room inside the thing, is just do something really cool like this. Open up a little room. And then if you guys have seen us doing high power insertions before, whenever you cut a slit in an increase stack, it makes room for a tiny little warp square or a huge warp square, but in this case it's a fairly small mouth. So you can actually just sew these open, fill in part of it, or do an insertion in there. And this is another one of the techniques we'll show in the book. But if I have something that barely fits me, I can take it into two things, and each one would be a start for another one. Or I can space them out. I can deconstruct the bangle, right? Leave a little bit of space between each layer and join them together with little pillars. But as long as your beadwork is careful, so you see right here, I cut in a different place, or I went to my step up and I pulled off a few beads of the other round. So this is like a worst case scenario, and it's not very bad, right? All I'd have to do is go fill in the missing beads in either round. So I'm glad that happened, because this is absolutely the worst fate that you have when you're cutting is, oh no, I have to put a few beads back on. But how else are you going to be able to make these fabulous deconstructed forms? So you see what fun you could have? You could even put something slightly larger in there so that that would be your sizing and it would hold it steady. It's also easy for me to just needle back up and sew those beads together. So if you do deconstruct something that you don't enjoy, or you go, oh no, I cut it here, there, and there, and so I got a different round, I can just go back and just needle it right back together. It doesn't care in the slightest. But since two rounds hold on every single round of peyote, or two threads hold on every round of peyote, you can always remove just one and have the beadwork still stay together. The only thing that you need to know is that now each of those are what I call a raw edge. They only have one thread going through them. So you need to go through and reinforce, but it's a heck of a lot easier than starting to rickrack from scratch, wouldn't you say? So that's how deconstruction works. And as I say, we have lots and lots of videos on deconstruction we've put in over the years, and there's an exploding podcast set that you can watch close up. And we can add emerald band to any of this that we wish. So rickrack, I think we've covered. Your only job with your rickrack is to see if your piece fits you. If it's too big, add more rounds. If it's just right, congratulate yourself and know that if you want to make it bigger, you'll need to start with more rounds. Everybody started with 6. And so if you wanted your rickrack to be bigger on the same podcast, just do your wave one more section or start it when it's 7 rounds. That's all you need to know. If it's too small, do 7 beads per side per round. If it's too big, perhaps you'd like to step down to 5 beads per side. But remember, we all have 3 rickrack sizes: the bangle size, and your straight bracelet size, and then your tall and short bangle sizes, right? Yeah, Tyler beads is nice, or you can just make stacks or anything like that. Susan was mentioning what you can do to keep these strips apart. And Tyler beads are a great suggestion. Anything that has dimension and that it's easy to do architecture with, you can put anything you want to between these sections to hold them apart. Even bugle beads, I've seen that done too. So now I'd like to show you how to deal with the wave section. When you saw my wave before in the family photo, this gray wave here that I showed in the photos, it looked a little different than this because it had the sizing band in it already. And so I want to show you how to handle these pieces. This one tries on just the slightest bit bigger than this one that I took off of this set, and that's only because they're slightly different beads. They just feel a little different, but you see I have about this amount of size in each set. So what I do, then you have a lot of options with your wave piece. What you want is you want to make this fit you. And so the goal with our sizing here was that you should not have to actively decrease, because that's kind of a pain. So you want to take off a piece that fits you, just like this one fits me, a little bit too big. That's your ideal. And then what you do, because this is a raw edge, remember you have to reinforce it anyway. Every time you come to one of these valleys in the beadwork, you have an opportunity to decide, am I going to place one bead, two beads, or zero beads in this space? And if you place zero beads in each valley, that's a decrease, and your form will immediately get smaller. If you place two beads in this little valley right here, then your bracelet will be at its biggest size. For me, I just want to bring it in just a little bit, and so I'm doing the moderate thing, and I'm placing one bead in every valley, just one bead in every valley. And so I'll go along and I'll continue to build this sizing band in here, and I'll put a few more rounds on, right? And by doing this, I'll ensure that not only will this wave section fit me perfectly, but at any time I want to, I can take a sizing band off of the inside that will in fact be my perfect bangle fit. And I took this off as a casting spine, and I'll show you how to do that. All you have to do is find your perfect size in your wave bangle and then reinforce it. So I know already from my experiment on the other one that by filling one bead in every space in the inside round of my wave, it will fit me perfectly. And I'm going to put on another peyote round to lock that in. At that time, when I have two rounds on the inside of this wave, I'll be in perfect position to add three more rounds of flat peyote to that inside, stitch in the ditch through it, and take off my perfect casting spine, just like this one. And then this is the kind of a thing you can use to build any bangle you want to from, and it will always fit you. Presuming that you actually finish this into a band and then build from the band. So this is a fantastic sizing technique, and it will come off of one of these sections. And my guess is that it will be the inside of your wave, because for the math that I did for the different sizes, you should be able to tailor this in three different directions. Remember, pulling the crotch together for a decrease, right? These little valleys. Putting in one bead as I'm doing to stabilize it, or adding two beads in every center point to open it up more. So everyone do 2 rounds of peyote on the inside section of your wave, and use those rounds to determine your very best fit. You want a little bit of room. It shouldn't be snug, but you definitely need a little bit of room if you want to build your wave section into a hyperbolic bangle like this. And this is what I mean by sizing band. Also, I could take these 3 rounds of gold off as a casting spine anytime I wanted to, or build it higher and then take one off of there. And this is one I built to fit a large. So this is too big for me. And this is the difference between 24 points and 22 points in the podcast. Nancy Dale, we haven't done the stitch in the ditch yet. We're doing each section at a time. We've just talked about rickrack and now the wave section. And now we're going to talk about the spines that we took off and the stitch in the ditch. So these spines came off, even though they were built around the edge of the podcast bead, they came off as 6 rounds of the most soft, succulent peyote stitch ever. And so this is what I do with them, and this is important. This isn't just me having fun. This is what you need to do to equalize the thread, because these were born folded. What you really want is you want them to feel comfortable in the real world. So rather than pushing them this way, the best thing to do is wrap them around your finger in both directions, just gently. What you're doing is you're telling them, this is how I want you to distribute your extra thread. You will be soft and supple, and you will be able to go in both directions equally. And then we're going to do a stitch in the ditch on those guys that turns them into 2 vibrant helical coils. Like, let me show you a finished one here. This is a live line, and it has a coil preference. Flat peyote just lay there, right? this thing is alive. So the way that we do this is we put a stitch in the ditch round on 3 rounds of regular peyote, and the line comes alive. And so in biology and in life, we see this string in the pocket suddenly turning to life, but it's rare to be able to capture this in mathematics. And so this is one of the exciting things that we were able to bring to the Bridges conference. We can show how an essentially completely flat run of beadwork will immediately jump into a wriggling snake if you give it a wave form of information that tells it you are now a helical coil. So let me show you how to do that. I'll start with the one that I've already got going. And this is the last step of processing your pieces and parts from the podcast. And then, oh, so much more to come. So this spine section, you may remember from the family photograph that I had deliberately built one of my rounds of 3 all the way to the edge of the pod, as we did. But then one of them I left a little bit shorter so that I could kind of finish the tail of this to show you. And so this has been seen in different iterations, but you can see now that I have stitch in the ditch rounds on almost the whole thing. The gold is finished, and up here I'm just finishing the stitch in the ditch on the yellow, gray, and blue round. And so what you do here is, and don't worry, I'll show this many ways, including in a close-up, high-quality video on YouTube. But for those of you who understand stitch in the ditch, you're going to get this right away. Let me get a few beads handy here. Ignore the gold beads. That section is already finished. Look only at the blue beads, which are the second of 3 rounds. The gray's a little bit hard to see, but there's a gray round here, a blue round, and a yellow round, right? 3 rounds of plain peyote make up this spine. I am only concerning myself with the blue beads, and I'm doing a stitch in the ditch, which is dip into just the blue bead, sew on my red bead. I hold my thread back too to make sure that I'm not doing any thread crossing. Get another bead on, dip only into the blue bead, and this is stitch in the ditch. It's something that you do on the outside of a fabric. And normally I'm not a big fan of this because it pulls the beadwork, but here, there's no beadwork to pull. This is just a small run of flat peyote. And it's really easy to control these beads and to know which side is up when they're on the spine. You may ask, why don't you separate these and do them one at a time? Well, that's because they definitely have an upside and a downside now. And if I were to separate these and finish them singly, it's really easy for the loose 3-bead peyote to get twisted. And if you do this so that there is a continuous build on one side, then you will get a beautiful helical coil. If you build it so that it twists back and forth and you're never doing exactly the same stitch with the beads, then you won't get a beautiful helical coil. You'll get a lively, twisty form that's completely serviceable, but it won't ever look like that beautiful ringlet of hair. So what I do is I do the stitch in the ditch on each of the spine sections while they're still together. And I'll show you on the other one how I start the thread. But I almost always hold it, fold it over my hand like this. And then when I complete the stitch in the ditch on the spine, this is another thing that I love the loop for. I reinforce through the loop. This is how I end my thread. And so now I'll pass gently, 1 bead at a time sometimes, through the loop at the end, reinforcing it. And then I will hide my thread down inside the spine. And I'll show you on the other one how to start the stitch. So no fear. And as soon as I come around here, remember this thread has been down through the whole spine, I will reinforce. And again, I like to do kind of an X pattern when I only have a few rounds. And I'll bring my thread down through some of the beads in my spine, right? And I'll reinforce it. So I won't bore you with that reinforcement. Instead, let me show you how cool it is when the spines then come apart. I've got some deconstruction beads I put here too on this one, I think. No, just on the other one. I knew how easy it would be to get this one apart. This was my own build. I mean, I made it. I knew exactly how easy it would be. But when I'm helping you all make yours, I wanted to be sure there were deconstruction beads so that no one had a problem. Piece of cake, will you look at that? Let me groom some threads off. And it's as simple as that, right? So here is one spine, and my needle's still on it because I'm reinforcing, but look at this beautiful little lively line. And then let me clean off the gold one and show you what it looks like. Isn't that cool? So the gold one is, it's beautiful. Doing things in one color can be a bit challenging, right? So if it's your first, I recommend doing a piece like this. And then again, as you take it off, see, it's got a nice coil to it, but I like to tell it who and what it is. And so I'll generally put it into a coil form after it's made and just let it understand that that's what it is now. And so now this right here, see that beautiful ringlet form is starting to come in. And as it gets more and more used to being who and what it is, it'll start to express more and more its natural wave. It's really interesting, but I think more than the threads stretching in this circumstance, they're just finding their feet because they were just born. And, you know, they'll find their way. But you are building in a twist when you do the stitch in the ditch smoothly, all on one side, and with a nice, even, regular tension. And so when I'm doing the stitch in the ditch, I'm usually working over my finger like this to maintain the ringlet form that I want to encourage. So let me pick up the flat one here and show you how I start. And here we see the deconstruction beads between the two spines. And so just for convenience's sake, I think I'll begin the stitch in the ditch on the other side of the spine that doesn't have deconstruction beads, although it doesn't really matter. So those of you who have questions, there are team members online. Oh, and Carol says she did damage to one of the threads, but that's okay. I mean, your first deconstructions, you probably are going to have a few problems here and there. And honestly, even those of us who've done this many times, once in a while, things go wrong. It doesn't matter in the slightest. This is such wonderful architecture. There's no other way to get this. And so what you do is you learn to be smart when it really matters. You'll reinforce every final edge before you begin a new section. And, you know, if you know that you might be prone or you have a form that'll be hard to read, use a different thread for the first round or try some dissolving suture. You know, there are lots of tactics you can do not to go wrong. But generally, this work's such a treat that I just simply allow the beads themselves to be great. And if there's a small problem, I fix it. So this is how I start the stitch in the ditch. And again, I'll get as close as I can. And if it allows me to focus, I will. Hinkiness. So I like to weave in. Remember, stay in your lane. I'm only going in the gold right now. I like to weave in a little bit of an X pattern, as I've mentioned before. I go across. And don't burden yourself with a huge length of thread when you're doing this stitch in the ditch. This is a brand new thread. You don't need more than 2 feet of it. I've left a nice tail on the other end here to be able to reinforce. And I'll use these same red beads here just so you can see what I'm doing. So this is how I start. I've just woven in a little bit. No knots, please. You want a supple thread here that traverses the entire piece. So all I'm doing is I am stitching the ditching through the second of the 3 rounds. And what this does is it turns a flat set of 3 beads into an incredible piece. Please focus. Well, it's not really letting me focus. Sorry, but I'll do a close-up, don't worry. This turns this 3 bead form into a coil with a central core and 3 live casting lines. So this is how to do stitch in the ditch. And again, if you can't see close up, don't worry, don't worry. We'll show it, or go look at the other video on Exploding Podcast. Yeah, the band's getting really joyful now as we talk about stitch in the ditch because, oh, look at that little curl, right? And so immediately, just as you start doing stitch in the ditch through each of the second sections, this whole thing will begin to curl beautifully. So I think that's enough for now. I just wanted to show you the basic steps. And of course, I will be showing much, much more. This is a sizing experiment that we're running now. And so as soon as we're confident about our sizing, we'll do the real thing. Oh, and I did want to do one more thing. It reminds me when I picked that up. I wanted to show you something neat. This is a piece in progress, right? I'm not done with what I'm doing, but if I want to, I'm cutting the first rounds here that put it on. My podcast ends with yellow beads or blue on the other side, and I'm cutting the first round of orange here. Because I want to remind you that should you choose to do it, you can take these big structures off and you can work them in bangle form. And so this is something neat that I have going on. It's a little bit different. I did a little bit of rickrack and then I'm transitioning into an all wing on the other side. And so this is something that it's sturdy enough now that if I want to work it in bangle form, I can. And if this one thing is going to be a bangle, it's actually a good idea that I do that because that way I can control the sizing. And I do have detonation points here. Sometimes I make them like long little tails like that. And you see, they're not my favorite. I prefer just straight snipping, but you have to have the right tool to do that. So I prefer straight snipping. For me, it's easier and everything comes off a treat. But that's because I have these beautiful scissors. I was sad to see there's knockoffs of these out there now. I won't mention who made them, but it's a little unfortunate. Someone copied this work exactly and knocked off these gorgeous scissors. And so that's too bad. Karen K. Buckley worked hard to make these for us. So detonation points that I didn't need kind of harmlessly come away. And look at that. So there's my little podcast back out. And now I've got this really interesting form that if I did it right, will just fit me, yes. See, this podcast is just perfect for me, right? The 21 point. And now I can build this as one interesting bangle, which I can wear. And this will get really more significant as this goes along because this has two sides and I'll be able to choose which side I want to wear. Or I can deconstruct this into different parts. So let me get out of this here. So again, it's interesting. It's just another interesting thing that we can do, right? And so this came off of this, which was the same size as this, which extracted all of these other beautiful forms. And so process your wave. This is what I'd like to ask you to do. Your podcast is fine. It doesn't need your attention. Process your wave section by creating the correct sizing on the interior. And I demoed this for you on the pretty gray one, how you saw me putting one bead at each valley, but pointing out that for fit reasons in here in these spaces, you could also put 0 beads or 2 beads if you wanted to make it fit you perfectly. So size your wave so it fits you. You saw how big mine was when it came off. And then if you want to, you can build it into something gorgeous like this beautiful bangle right here. And this is a sizing band. It's all done in those pretty gold beads. And that's the kind of thing that you're working for right now. Get a sizing band around your wave of a few rounds of plain peyote. You can see here, actually my sizing band was done in pink. Then just for fun, I did a little emerald ad in clear beads, and then this is me building a gold casting spine or a set of casting spines or just a beautiful gold band to stay on top of the piece forever. That's possible too. But once you get the sizing band in, you begin to see how the flat plain peyote will follow the waveform but do its own individual thing. So I think you're really going to like this. We have so much more to show. This was basically just a session to get your podcast set apart. So sorry about the technical difficulties we had at the beginning, and I hope you enjoy.